Hello, everyone, and welcome to Class Experience. I am here with Valentina Garcia. She is an actress here in Los Angeles. She does film and TV and commercials. And I've known Valentina for quite a long time. We've both been in the business forever. Hi, Valentina.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to ask you all the questions. So let's just dive
Let's
right
dive in. Yeah, let's go.
in. Awesome. All right. How long have you been in the business? I know I've known you forever, but tell everybody how long you've been in the business, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say officially I've been like full time in it for 15 years in terms of like full time. This is what I do, no extra jobs. Um, so I Backstory is that I was born in Mexico City, came here when I was a kid around 6, and then would go back and forth between my mom in the States and my dad in Mexico. And then my dad is from Chile, so he moved there. So then it was back and forth from Chile. And I kind of knew I wanted to act since I can remember. I mean, I remember it in Spanish, so it's obviously I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I went to college for it and moved in New York, stayed there for a couple of years and came out here and then just sort of pounded the pavement. And then I'd say technically 14 years ago was when I was like, all right, sink or swim, let's do this.
So was English your second language or, oh, cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know that about you.
Yeah. So I learned English in the States. And it's funny because my oldest son now is the same age or a little over 6 and so I've had this really interesting experience with him this year. So I'm like, holy shit, I didn't know this country. I didn't speak a word of English. I didn't know anybody.
Wow.
And now you're that age and you're like a full person. It's obviously really, I don't even think until now did I see how much it's really shaped who I am in general. So
Cool. Well, today we're going to focus specifically on commercials
not
and
on my life history, not on my journey to the States.
but I mean all that stuff shapes us,
Yeah.
right? But just a little background, like Valentina, I see you in real life in auditions, but I see you more on TV than I see you in real life because she does not stop working.
Yeah.
She has a recurring campaign with Progressive. That's the one that I'm always like, oh my God, there she is again. And you have done commercials for Corona, Tide, Wayfair. I've seen the Wayfair one. That one's currently running. AT&T, JCPenney, Honda. I mean, McDonald's, all the
Yes, if it's a corporate entity, I have tried to sell you it.
cool. So tell me what would you say your bread and butter as far as types? What is because I think that's something that actors sometimes don't realize how important it is. And
Yes.
when you have a long career, you kind of understand
Yeah.
that you do have your, what I call your bread and butter or your, money-making types. What are those
Totally.
for you, Valentina?
I think for me, like I'll never be the sip and smile. Like those were out of my range from
Okay.
when I was a young person out here. It just isn't like because if it says no dialogue, I should probably just walk out of the room because that's just I have to vocalize. I don't know if it's just the Latina in me, I just need to express who I am. So if it needs to be really like subtle, understated sip and smile, like I should graciously step aside for someone else to do it. Mine is a little bit more like sassier coworker. If it's not going to be the sweet mom who's putting on a band-aid, it's kind of the mom who maybe shoves you out the door even if you have a fever. Like so I just know I'm always the one that has a little bit like off center. And I think it's a little bit of a cat and mouse though, because or a chicken and egg thing. I also think I approach it as that mom or that friend or that sister. So sometimes it gets switched a little because that's who I am. So I think that's what I bring to the table.
Got it.
So I'm like, I don't know, they might have wanted it to be more gentle and
But
sweet.
that's essentially your essence.
Right.
And so therefore you book it and you're like, oh, this is who I am, or this is what I book, but it's just who you are.
It's who I am. So it's sort of like sometimes, I think advice I always give people is do it the way that you interpret the script, because sometimes what ends up happening is that you're at least a contender. I'm on a veil a lot, I think, because they're like, huh, maybe we
Yeah.
could do it that way. And then it might not happen. And they're like, no, you guys, we have to sell this product with like a nice person. But like, I think that sometimes I show them an option of like, or maybe this woman is exhausted and is kind of pissed at her husband, and we didn't see it that way. And so I think that's just, I think do it the way you think it should be done, the way that you would do it. And at least, you walked out of there being like, well, I don't know, I thought it was fun. Or at least I thought that was funny.
But it's funny because I feel like you do that so beautifully in the sense that you do that, shoving them out of the door, maybe when they have a fever, but you do that with so much like love
Yes.
that there's such a great commercial balance there. Where
Yeah.
it's not like, oh my gosh, we should be calling like CPS on this woman.
Right.
It's just so beautiful. Like there's such a tonally wise, it's really spot on. And you're like, oh, I like that, right?
Yeah, and at the end, you have to remember, especially because we're talking commercially, the product is the star. You're not the star. Like they're trying to sell something. At the end of the day, you are a vehicle to help them sell something. So you don't want people looking at the commercial and being like, yeah, I would love to buy that product, but she's kind of a bitch. Like, I don't think I want to be the person that buys that or whatever it is. So like you do have to get, and also I am a good person. So I think that shines.
Yeah, I think being able to not make it like so sweet that
Right.
empalaga, but sweet enough, but like it still has a little bit of an edge is such a sweet spot in commercials. And I
Yes.
think you see that beautifully, especially for like comedy. And I think, with everything kind of going so crazy right now with like union and non-union and everything, they really do need good actors, especially in the comedic spots.
Yes. Yeah,
So
it's shifted.
have you done improv? Are you a stand-up comedian? Like how
Yeah,
have you been able to
I've
hold that particular skill, which I think you're really good at? How have you done that?
Yeah, improvisation has always been a huge part of my, like, even when I was a kid, I loved improv. I did it in college. It's a huge part of it. And to tell you the truth, I encourage every actor, even if it's something that terrifies them, then absolutely get into even a first level class. You don't need to graduate and have like stand-up comedian. You don't have to have a bunch of characters under your belt, but just being able to think on your toes and switch, especially because commercially they're throwing things at you all the time. And you have to remember, you've got the 6 copywriters, but you've got like 12 agency people who are shifting it every time. So if you're not able to pivot, you're going to freak yourself out. And I do think commercially more than anything, actually more than theatrically, I think commercially having that is a huge tool in my toolbox that has helped me tremendously. Tremendously.
Great. So let's go. Have you had a lot of commercial agents, or have you been with one agency for a long time? Like, what has your experience been with agents? Because I know that varies for everybody.
Totally. I've been with my agent for a really long time, but I think it's also because we've really crafted, they know who I am now. I rarely get to an audition. I'm like, why the hell am I here? Like, why would I be here for this? So I feel like the relationship I have with them is great, but I get that people switch. I never had this chip on my shoulder of feeling like if it's not a certain agent or like the top or this name to me, as long as they're getting me through the door and I feel really comfortable bringing up issues with them. I don't want super hand-holdy either. So I wanted to find the right balance of, can I bring something up to you if I find this uncomfortable, or I don't want to go out on this. This is not whatever, all the issues we all have. So I've been with my same agent for, I'd say, the whole time.
Oh, wow. That's
I think I switched once. I was with an agency first and they were really big and like had a very big name. And I felt like I was kind of getting lost in the shuffle, and I didn't really understand why I would care who it was as long as I was at the top of the pile and being considered, because there are a lot of times, I worked in casting, which is something that I think is like another pill. I mean, another like super gift.
Totally.
You can work in casting.
What did you learn when working in casting?
It is unbelievable. First, you get to see what the whole journey is from when the casting director gets a call and says, this is the spot I want, all the way to booking, it is a winding journey that you wouldn't know unless you're in there. I think that running the front office is great because you get to really see how treating people with kindness is really important. Being the type of person that someone would want to have. Ultimately, commercial is, yes, by the end of I'm getting all over the place, but when you get to the end, there's like the 4 people that they're looking at, or the 3, you could all do it. You could, like,
Totally,
right?
totally.
Like, it's not like when I book it, it's like, I've never even imagined a person be able to be this amazing, not even close to that.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're already at the callback and you're already on the avail list and already in the contenders, do I want to also spend 16 hours with this person on set? And that
Yeah.
starts way earlier than when you book.
Yeah.
So the front desk, just knowing what it is to timing and figuring that, sitting in on a session, seeing what the camera operator is doing, really, like, every part of it is such a gift that I feel like has been so helpful for me. And I can see the people that haven't ever had to work.
I also, once I was helping, like, checking people in.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I did that. And I remember before that thinking, like, why are these people so, like, grumpy?
Right.
After the first day of me doing that, I was like, oh, this is why they're so grumpy, because you're asking an actor that you're there on deck and to stand here. And
Totally.
they're going over there and talking to their friend. And I'm like, I just,
Right.
and
And
I was
you're
like,
45 minutes behind now, but this person came early and that person called, but then they didn't. But now you're having to pair people. The casting director has 3 jobs going. You're supposed to keep in order. The session director's talking with their buddy, and it's just like this
yeah,
madhouse. And remembering, when is it time for you to be like, hey, I need to go. Like, I have to hurry up. I'm so sorry. Or
yes,
when is it like, sit and read your book and just be quiet?
yes. And that actually reminded me of that first session. And there was one actor who was like, I want to go with this other actor. And I was like, this is who you're paired up. And he made it so difficult. And I remember being like, oh, I
Right.
love it so
Yeah.
much.
Right. And then you can go back there and tell the casting director, just so
Yeah.
you know, that person was really rude to me. That person
Yes.
really made
For
my life
no
really hard
reason. And
for
making
no
the other actors
reason.
feel shitty,
Yeah.
you
It's an
know?
awful feeling. Already you feel being in the waiting room is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Hearing a person's callback is awful.
Yeah.
Looking at the time that they're in there and then knowing that you went in there for 30 seconds, or they're all laughing it's awful. So,
It's
like, let's, like,
awful.
not make it worse for everybody.
Totally. Totally. Now, physically, you don't look like traditionally Latina,
Yeah.
right? I kind of do, but I also don't.
Yeah. You're a
I know
crossover.
what it's like to be like in that, like not God smacked with like, oh,
Right.
she's Latina.
Right.
Talk to me about that, because I feel like sometimes actors that are in that situation feel a certain way. And I know that that's kind of affected me
Yeah.
for some time, not anymore. Now I'm like, but talk to me a little bit about that.
I think that that's probably more of a journey, an internal journey that we probably have to just go on and might have a relationship with our whole
Yeah.
lives. 'Cause there's so many times where I walk into some rooms and I'm too white, I'm too Latina for other rooms, I'm not enough of this, I'm not like, we're always kind of feeling like we're not enough, right? So that's something that's like between me, my journal, and my therapist. And I've worked really hard at figuring out that, like, they called me in for a reason.
Yes.
I was called in. Everyone else here has their own opinions and their own biases and their own ideas of what they think things look like. But that casting director, I didn't like send in a sketch of me. Like, they saw what I looked like. They know what their clients wanted. I didn't put in, like, I didn't like send a Chilean flag in and be like,
Yeah,
oh, this
yeah,
works.
totally.
And I think you just have to, like, really just sit there and remember that, like, you're here for a reason, and it's not up to you or anyone else to decide how it goes. So, but yeah, I think that's just a lifelong struggle. I think I think identity is just also becoming a really big thing that we're all discussing now, and feeling like, where do we fit in the world?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm glad it's coming to light, because a lot of times I felt really, like, bashful and scared about how I felt about, like, not being enough. And now I kind of own it as This
Yeah.
is who and I can't change
Something
any.
that makes you like special and this is what
Yeah.
you look like, so on and
This
so
is
forth.
what
Yeah.
I got, and I can't really do much about it. I also think times are shifting, and a lot of casting directors are getting that we all, I don't know, being Latin and Latinx looks like we're from all over because we are.
Totally.
So there isn't like one version of what it should look like. And I
Yeah.
think it's catching on.
Yeah, I just hear a lot of actors that may not look the traditional Latina, like as
Yeah,
I'm, coaching them and be like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get it because of that. And I'm like, they called you in.
they called you in.
Don't worry about that part. And you can't change the way that you look.
That's right.
So let's not focus on that and let's focus on what we can affect.
Right. I got called in for something recently that was white presenting Latina. And I was like, oh, they're really getting specific now. So they
Wow.
even understand that, like, and this was theatrical, but there is a shift in understanding that, like, I don't know, that we look
That
like
we
we're
look,
from all over
yes, yes.
because that's what we are. And again, if they call you in, and this is for any type of job, there are times where I get called in and I'm like, I can't be this fill in the blank. But they called me
Yeah,
in, but they see something that would
yeah.
be that way, right? So yeah,
It's
I
okay.
wouldn't get ahead of yourself there is what I would suggest for people. Don't try to play casting director, right? Isn't that what they say? Don't like you're not the casting director. You
Yeah.
don't know, you're not privy to all that information on the side of what
You have no idea what's going on the
no
other side.
deep.
I will say there was I did a job and I went in for construction worker.
Hmm.
Exactly. And I was like, why am I doing this?
Please
This
tell
is
me you booked it. Of
yeah, I did.
course. Yeah. Because also that's what I mean, also hair and makeup casting, like you could like
Yeah,
isn't
I mean,
job?
yeah, I was like, okay, wear
Yeah,
my hair a certain way, don't wear my pearls,
totally.
like do certain things. And the thing that we don't understand or we may not be privy to is that this particular commercial was about things that are not the norm. Somebody who you wouldn't expect to be a construction worker is a construction worker, right? And I was like, here I was all up in my head talking all this ish.
Totally. Totally. I went in as a sports fan, like super, super sports fan. From the moment I opened my mouth, it was so clear that I was a moron. And then I got switched to a different role,
Right,
right?
right.
So that's fine. I went in, did the best I could, but then was still myself in some way.
Sorry,
And
mom's gonna
so
have
that's
to.
okay. And then got switched to something else. So don't count yourself out just because of your own neuroses of what you think you should be.
How do you deal with those situations where, because I feel like that's something that throws a lot of actors off, is when you go in for employee and now you're customer. How do you deal with that?
I like it, but that's because I'm much better on my toes than it allows me to not overthink it.
Okay.
Nothing is better for me than a switcheroo.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think for me, it also allows me to be really in the moment in a way that I wouldn't have been. Like, this doesn't happen as much anymore, but like a straight to callback is my favorite, or something where they like throw you in last minute. I don't have that first one to be like, how did I do it? I don't
Uh-huh.
know what they liked about the first one. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what happened the first time. So I can sort of be a little bit more present. Isn't
Okay, so something that you're saying that I love that even in the mindset aspect of it, you're like, I like that shit.
yes, I
I'm sure
do.
that helps.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, thank God. Now I don't have to like, now I can just sort of like, whatever comes up is right or wrong. Like, I don't have this like preconceived of like, how did I do it? Or what was so good about it last time? Or no, but that's not how I did it the way. Or like, oh no, they're switching it. So now that the camera person is now like all that stuff can get really in all our heads because
Okay.
we want to do it right. We want to book it, blah, blah, blah. But this way, when it's sort of like, oh no, actually, yeah, you're not the mom anymore. You're the friend. I'm like, oh, well, I guess. And then they'll just open the door and you're like, I'm the friend. There's
You're like,
something about it that's exciting to me and makes me feel less stuck.
and have you always felt this way?
I always felt this way. I know probably when I was greener, I felt a little bit more pressured to like replicate. I think it's more the freedom that I have found in it over time has shown me that it can be really fun to be, because that's kind of what we all went into it. There is something about it that's exciting, right? Like if we can also shift the perspective of being nervous and looking at it as this actually kind of excitement that's in our, it's a combination of nervous, but like this is why we do this. We like the energy, we like performing, we like telling a story. And if we can kind of shift that narrative, it does help in the moment feel less constrained by this idea to perform and do it right, which is just who I am. So I think that's probably why I like improvisation to begin with, but just this idea of like,
Hi, I'm
hey,
Valentina
hi, I
Garcia.
was the mom. I'm not the mom anymore. I guess I'm the like creepy neighbor.
Okay.
So
Okay, and then when you do have a first call, how do you approach the callback? Are you like, do you think at all about the first call, or do you go, oh, I mean, what is that process for you?
I feel like everyone is really different because I have friends who love this and will wear whatever. I wear the same outfit.
Mhm.
Like that's just always been something I'm like, I don't know, they saw me in that.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
just sort of, so I have, like, for me, that's sort of like, I guess how some people have like little rituals. Mine is just wearing the same outfit. And
okay.
then do I think about the first call? Not really, not a ton, because I got back for some reason. So
Okay.
yeah, I try not to like overthink the first call. Also, I'm kind of don't remember the first call a lot of the time. I'm like, what happened? Often, I mean, a lot of times we leave the room, we're like, I don't even know what just happened in there. At least I do, which
Valentina, I love the freedom that you, I mean, you're just kind of like being really, really present.
yeah. So there's a lot of times I walk out and I'm like, I don't even know if that was, what did I even do the right spot?
I love that. And as far as lines, do you stick to the script? Are you talk to me about that portion as well?
That's where I do get into a little bit of trouble because I do veer off script a lot. And then um I stay well in the world, but I always think like you have like cute little phrases that you use with your students. I feel like for me, it's like you sort of sandwich it with like you enter the scene with your own with something, right? Because they press start before they say actions that
Totally.
right? So
Yeah.
find a way into the scene that isn't just so randomly like hand me the butter and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like pass me the butter, or you're just like having those moments that breathe life into the scene and then exit your way out. Do not stop until until they are like, we're out. Because those moments, they trail off. The camera person's doing their own thing. They're looking at their phone. The director's sort of still watching the clients. And if you can breathe life into a kind of stagnant scene, I think that's important. You need to stay within the world of the words, but I think going off of it can help if that feels right to you. I
Right.
don't want you to feel so nervous. I don't know. I feel like there's so many times we feel so nervous about staying with the lines, but if they like you, I have many times been sent out, been like, thanks, Valentina, I'll leave. They say, hey, Valentina, can you give us a second? Can you look at the script and go back in? We'll have a couple of people going for you and do the lines accurately. So I can tell, okay, they like me. They just need me to say Verizon 5S G series. And I've just been
Yeah.
saying what the fuck I want. I've been talking about AT&T the whole time. So they need for the client on their side to give them a tape that says me actually knowing how to say the words.
Yeah.
If they do like you, yeah, I don't know. I get scared giving that advice because I'm like, I don't like just go off the rails. But I do think breathing life into a scene
It's
gives.
it's funny that you're saying that because I do this thing in callback club where, I give some sides and then people turn in self tapes and, I ask for two takes and most of the time people will use like uh, the exact like scenario in the instructions. And I always tell them to like, fine, if you want to use that, like use it for one and the other one, do something very
Totally.
different. Like the one that we did yesterday, they're having dinner and then there's a little bit of, like cider that gets spilled and it's like, oh my gosh, whatever. And I was telling them, I'm like, we've watched date tapes. How do you feel about watching people spilling the cider after the 8th time? And by the way, they're watching 92 more tapes after that. So imagínate how you feel about
Yeah.
that at that point. So
Yeah.
if you want to show one, sure. In the other one, have a different part of the dinner where you're finally done with the food and you're like, oh my gosh, that was right. Because it's just different.
It's different and no one wants to see the same thing over again. And again, they're not worried about, unless it's about the spilling of the cider as you're
Correct.
there for a cider commercial. But other than that, it's just suggestions. It's someone that wrote the idea of like, something happens at the table, right?
Something
You
happens
can
at the
instead of
table.
be like, okay, we're gonna have to talk about the science fair, right? Like
Yeah.
anything that's in the world, you're not gonna talk about something completely off the mark, but within that, you can tell, like, no, nobody gets up from the table, right? Like anything that makes it so like, oh, I've been at that table
I've
before,
been at that table.
right?
When people get so caught up with like the instructions and
I
following
barely read the
instructions.
instructions. I barely read the
I
instructions.
love you, Valentina.
I look. I see, okay, this is the gist of it.
Yeah.
Unless you go in and the caster is like, this is for a self tape, but let's say you're in there, listen to what the casting or the camera person is telling you. The beats that are like then you walk over and pick this up because that person has to take it from you. Don't go not pick that up because you're being a jerk. But like outside
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
it's not integral to the scene. I don't see why.
But I also feel like you're just like you've been doing this for so long. It's sort
Right.
of like you're like, this is just like second nature to you. Because again, I'm even thinking about when I've helped out in casting and the session runner gives a suggestion for a moment before. And when I tell you there, it's a group explanation and everybody uses that same moment before. And this is where you have to decipher the difference between like what notes to take and make them your own. And then other things, it's like, this is a placeholder for a moment before, make it your own. Don't use the same moment before that they're telling everybody to use it, but everybody's going to use that.
Right. That's a great thing. If they are giving an instruction and they say, enter the scene like you just got home from work. Hi, honey, I'm home. What you do is you take that and you do a version of that.
Version.
A version of that. What they're saying is that you need to announce that you're home, right? So you can say, hey, kids, can someone help me with the groceries? Anything that just announces that you're home.
Correct.
You're announcing that you don't live alone. You're announcing that you came home from work. Like that's it. Like that's it. You don't need to be like, the aliens are chasing me. Someone get the door. Like,
Yeah.
but within that world, but do not, whatever that comes out of their mouth that's not on the script, do not anytime use that, because that means that 45 people just used it. And here's a super tip that I'm upset I'm going to tell you about, but I do think this, ask them, is there anything you've seen that's worked?
Ah.
Because a lot of times they'll be like, they will give you a nugget of like, you know what I haven't seen today? Or you know what I see is working? They're there to help. So if you can ask the session director, is there anything have you thought of anything? Like, do you have a button that would work? Oftentimes we've been here all day and they're like, you know what? No one has done this.
I
Because
love
they've
that.
been watching it all day. And I don't know, I like the collaborative part of it. And I've also like, thank you. Or have you seen something that does not work at all?
Yeah.
Right? Because they've been watching for maybe 3 days at this point, and they can give you a lot of tips on like, people are coming in hot. And it's the director is making us have a third day because they do not want that kind of energy. And you're like, great.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that is like a brand new thought for me.
Right? Like, why wouldn't we use them?
Totally.
They're so helpful. And if they say, no, not really, I don't have time for this, that's fine, whatever. But
Yeah,
like, you could
totally.
potentially get something that gets you that callback because they're like, why has no one addressed that the grandma's sitting there? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that either.
And how do you feel about self-tapes versus being in the room?
It's tough. I mean, it's something we just have to accept. It's like, it's almost like a moot point to discuss why, like, I don't know.
You
I
just
would,
gotta be good at both of them
you
because
just
they're
got,
both
that's
part
just what it
of
is.
our business.
Yeah, 50-50 is gonna be, I think it's just the way it is. It's saving way too much money. Too many casting offices have closed. I think it's just part of what it is. So it's almost like get on board because it's what it is. I prefer in person always because I like the energy of working with someone else. I
Yeah.
do like having the direction of someone that kind of knows what's going on. I like like the session director, I think can be really invaluable because they can give you so much insight. They're the second
They've
hand.
been seeing everybody and when everybody's turning in.
Yeah. And they
Yeah,
talk to the director all day. They sometimes sit in on the session with the, client. So to me, that part I think is such a loss for us because we're kind of going blind.
yeah,
Um, for callback, it has to be in person.
yeah.
Callback, like, oof,
And even now with the callbacks being in person, a lot of times it's just the
I
session
know.
runner and
It is.
then everybody else is on Zoom.
I
And
know.
the job that I just did in New York,
Yeah.
I didn't, everybody was, no one was there except for the session runner. And it was a comedic spot. But, and when I went into the actual shoot, one of the agency people came up to me and was like, oh my gosh, you were so funny at the callback. But at the callback, I had
Didn't hear
zero
anything.
feedback because everybody's muted. And she was like, we were all dying laughing, which is something that we used to have in the room.
Totally.
And we used to be like, okay, I'm going in the right direction.
Right.
You're just doing something funny, you think, and you're
I
just like,
know.
I hope it's landing.
Totally. That part I think is a real bummer for us because it did sort of like it helped kind of guide. Also, how many times have you booked where you're not even they're like, can you hold on for a second? Something's going on with the camera. And then all of a sudden you have a 5-minute conversation about how you're both from, both happen to be in Seattle last weekend and they get to see you. And again, at a callback, I'd venture to say most of the people, but at least 50% could do the job. Like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
right. So at that point, they're just, splitting hairs.
yeah.
So if you have an opportunity to just have a
Conversation.
connection organically
Human.
with someone,
Totally.
yeah, that's so that part I definitely miss because I feel like there's a lot of jobs I probably shouldn't have booked, but they were like, she's kind of fun.
Yeah, we can hang out with her for
Yeah,
12 hours.
right. Like she wouldn't annoy the shit out of us for 12 hours. I'm not sure if she's right for this spot, but whatever. We'll just make it work. But you know what I mean? That part is a bummer. It's a bummer because we
Yeah,
like to perform.
yeah,
I don't do this to like sit in a tunnel by myself. So it's definitely
yeah,
hard, but unfortunately, it's just we have to embrace it and figure out a way to.
it is. And I guess lastly, is there any story or anything as far as like a callback that you learned something, or being on set that you learned something that you're like, oh, I'm gonna do more of this, or any good story about the millions of callbacks that, oh,
Right.
and before that, when you are gonna, like, when you book most of the time or you get put on a veil, do you feel it in the room, or most of the time you're like, oh, that was a surprise, I thought I bombed that? How do
Again, I
you?
have friends that are like, I know exactly when I'm gonna get in a veil and exactly not. Mine, I would not say mine's.
Yeah,
There are times where I've been like, am I gonna get a call before I get to the car? Like, am I
yeah,
gonna are they just gonna just book me? Should I go to the fitting and then I never hear anything?
anything,
I'm like, is
totally.
my phone broken? Like, what's happening? And then there are other ones where I'm like, I cannot wait to get out of this room. Get me out of this room. It was crickets. No one looked up from their computer. I did it once. I think the session director told me, like, okay, you can go. And then I'm on a veil. So, like,
You don't feel it in the room.
there's some where I'm feeling like this
Okay.
is at least I'm a contender, but no, I don't because it's so bizarro. You just don't know. You just sort of do your best. And I do give myself, I've always done this. I give myself 24 hours from the callback to like be excited or nervous or excited. And I go to the minute and then I have to let it go. 24 hours later, I cannot, if I think about it, I'm like, no, no, no. Because if not, I could really, you can spiral really quickly about like, what was in the room? I thought I did, wait, maybe I didn't. Because most people who have more traditional jobs have coworkers, have time at the water cooler to discuss things. We don't have that.
Totally.
So I try to apply as much as I can from like, what would a teacher do? They would go in the teacher's lounge and be like, that class was a fucking nightmare. Like, what happened to you? And we would spit, blah, blah, blah. And then 24 hours later, you'd move on and have to go on to your next class. But we don't have that. So I try to be like, okay, in these 24 hours, and the same goes to avails, because you sit there and you're like, am I booking? Like, do I need to block off next week, or am I never going to hear? Am I just is my life now?
I'm not gonna lie, avails still, there's times,
Ugh.
not all of them, but there's some, especially if I'm like, I know, the ones that I'm like, I know I booked this, and then you get put on avail and you're like, great, and then you don't hear, and you don't hear, and then
Yeah,
you never hear. Those are the ones that I'm like, oh, that wasn't
oh,
fun.
totally. Totally. I had one earlier this year that I'd say like for 2 weeks, I was like, I need to speak to a manager. Like, I was like, I need, what in the world? Like,
Right.
I was livid. I was like, I gave you that spot. I gave you that spot. And then I saw it months later and I was like, oh, she's adorable. She's perfect. She's adorable.
Yeah.
That woman is perfect. Chef's kiss. But at the time, I was like, I'm not going down like this. I was so pissed. And there are others that really hurt because you're like, oh, what? And you never get an answer. It's like you get broken up with and the other person just ghosts you. And you're like, well, what happened? I thought we were going somewhere. We're maniacs. It takes a type of like true, if you really want to do this for a long time and this is like, you can't breathe without it, then the main thing you have to do is have a relationship with yourself that's just very solid, because you are your own HR department, you're your own PR department, you're the CEO, the CFO, you do the hiring, and like you are everything, but it's just you. So you're just sitting here being like, so I think having that like sense of self is really important. But I'm sure you didn't ask me that question, but
No, but I'm so glad you said that, and the way you said it was so clear. And I'm so glad you also go through that sometimes, because I'm like, I've been doing this long enough where it's like, I should not be stressed out about an avail, but sometimes it kind of, I'm like, how did I not fucking book it?
oh yeah.
But at the same time, you also got to know, like, what, you're never going to work again. Like, of course, there's going to be a next one, and you just like,
I know. But if you didn't care, then you would just be like, whatever. Like, I didn't say those 24 hours are like me being like, whatever, I'm the best. No, I'm like, what happened? Like, because if I didn't care, I shouldn't be doing this, right? Of course I care. I care when I get released because it was a job that I really wanted. Of course I get pissed when I don't get a call back because I'm like, I worked really hard on that.
Yeah.
And you don't get the answer that normally someone else would be like, thank you so much. You were great, but you were totally wrong for this. We thought you were not funny at all. Like, you just are left to sort of be like,
yeah, there's no
oh, no. Yeah, I think you should call me when you stop being upset. Cause then that's like, ooh, do you give a shit anymore about
That's
this?
a good point. You gotta give like, it can't ruin your life, but you gotta, I think it's completely normal to just be like, yeah, that bothered me for longer than I maybe wanted it to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You really wanted this. You didn't go in there being like, whatever, take me, don't take me. Like, I don't like to put food on my table. Like, of course you get in there because you're like, I made choices that I liked. I think I'm good for this. I worked hard. I drove across town.
Drove across town.
Like, surely, like, I put my best foot forward and now nothing. Just go home and just never hear from you. Of course. I think that's like, if we say that to each other, if we lie to each other, then we're just that's like trolling each other.
Valentina, thank you so much for your time,
I could talk to
your
you all day.
insight. I learned stuff today, so that was really cool. And I love, and it's so funny because I do these and then I learn stuff and it reminds me of stuff that I should know. It's like being so present and being excited about when things change. I mean, these are just things that you relearn because
Yeah.
you kind of forget and you get maybe stuck in your ways, but
Exactly.
it was really, really insightful and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it should be fun at some point. It's got to be, you know, like we got to find the fun in the fact that it, you know, it is a job, it's work, and we have to
It's
like
a little bit of a torturous one.
yeah, it's a torturous one. I know. When I see people just like put on their scrubs and go to do work, I'm like, oh, so you just know your shift.
That different type of life.
Yes.
Again, thank you so much for your time. You guys, I share these. If you are interested in finding out more, sign up for the newsletter or follow me on Instagram. If you want to follow Valentina, are you private or are you public?
I
Is
don't
there?
know. I think it's
Okay.
just Valentina Garcia.
Okay. Valentina, thank you again. And I'm
Buena
sure
suerte.
actors, it's so helpful for actors to like help
Yeah,
each other. And I'm
totally,
sure everybody's
100%.
gonna come up to you at an audition and be like, oh, I saw this
Oh,
interview.
good. Yes, read. I mean, anytime. We're in this together. It's hard, but you know, you are the only one that's you, as you and I were talking about recently. Like, there's really you don't need to dim someone else's candle for you to shine, right? And sharing this, even sharing your tidbits, you're still going to do it differently than I would do it. So
Totally.
have the most information you can,
Yeah.
you know.
Nobody can be you and nobody can be,
Nobody.
so it's like, do you and then let them pick.
Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, honey. Ciao.